Welcome to Never By the Book podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Schols. At 24, I was dead broke and a full-blown alcoholic. By age 40, I was debt-free and a multimillionaire. Now I share my secrets of success and transformation with audiences around the world as a speaker, author, and of course your podcast host. Each Never By the Book episode features a guest who has overcome obstacles to build an incredible life of fulfillment. And on that note, our guest today is Megan Absten, former U.S. Paralympic Track and Field Athlete. After losing her arm in an ATV accident at age 14, she struggled with maintaining her mental health. After many years of grieving and healing and wondering, why me? She approaches her disability with candor, humor, and practicality, using her experience and outlook to help others find hope and self-acceptance. We've titled today's episode with one of Megan's favorite mantras, own your flaws, own your life. Welcome, Megan.
Thanks, Kelly. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you
Thanks
here.
for having me on.
I know we got delayed a couple months to having you on, but
I know. I'm glad that you're healthy and able to do it now.
I'm glad you're healthy too.
Me too.
Yeah. I want to talk about the day I heard what happened to you. I knew you were friends with one of my best friend's daughter, and you're about my oldest daughter's age. Mm-hmm. And I remember getting the phone call from them telling me what happened to you. Knowing that you were the same age as my daughter and going through that, I think it hit me like it probably hit a lot of people, especially in our valley. You know, we live in such a small valley. I mean, everybody knows everybody somewhere or another, right? And I had never met you, but I knew you through my friends.
Through the grapevine, as most people do in Skagit County.
Yeah, so when it happened, it was like, oh my God, what's this poor family gonna do?
Yeah, it was a wild ride, and it's always interesting to hear other people's kind of experience of hearing what happened to me, because for me, you know, it was just happening.
Right.
You know, it was accident, helicopter, harbor view, saving the arm, no arm. And I will say, you mentioned our community, and I am incredibly lucky to be from a place like Skagit County, because I don't know if I would have had the same success or would have been able to overcome it the way that I have had I not had the support from people in the community and, you know, people reaching out and being there for my parents, and even, you know, the Burlington Edison School District, which I ended up leaving before finishing. But just the sports, my coaches there, my teammates. Yeah. But yeah, it was definitely challenging for our family. We had just moved back from Florida a year before I lost my arm. Okay. And my parents were flipping homes down there, so the 2008 recession had hit them pretty hard. They literally lost practically everything, and so we kind of were moving back here as like a, you know, hitting the reset button as a family. And then not even a year later, I get in this tragic accident and lose my arm. So can you tell the audience how it happened? Yeah, sure. So I was 14 and I was on a side-by-side ATV, a Polaris Razor, out in a gravel quarry in Cedar Woolley. And I just didn't have experience on side-by-sides. I had ridden quads, but, you know, I didn't really understand that the side-by-sides tip as easily as they do. And I learned the hard way. So I ended up kind of swerving, and I fishtailed, and I overcorrected my turn. And instead of the ATV straightening out, it tipped on its side. I stuck my left arm out as a reaction, and the roll bar came down and landed on my arm. So you didn't read the precautions to keep your arms inside? No, I know, and they actually have nets on them. I know. Trust me, I've heard that one before. So it was 98% amputated. I was airlifted to Harborview, and they tried for about a week to save my arm. They took skin and muscle from my back and tried to patch it up, and they actually were able to get a pulse, which was encouraging. But the kind of the miraculous part of my story is that when the roll bar came down and landed on my shoulder, it pinched the brachial artery that's right there, completely closed. The shoulder dislocating actually completely cut off the blood supply. So when the paramedics got there, they were shocked because I wasn't bleeding. It took them 30 minutes to get there. And so, yeah, had that not happened, I would have bled out within just a couple of minutes. So kind of crazy, part of the story. But yeah, so after a week of trying to save it, they basically told me the risks. You know, it was going to take a couple more months to try and save the arm. And then even with all of that extra surgery, they couldn't promise that it would be successful. So at that point, I kind of was just over having this dead weight, you know, arm attached to my body and was just ready to amputate. And I think it was the best decision that I could have made. It was a hard decision, obviously, because at 14, you have to decide to cut off one of your limbs.
Yeah.
But I think it would have just really held me back had I kept it on. I would have had to wear a sling. I was a wrestler at the time. You know, and so after they did amputate, I actually was discharged like a week later because it was just sucking the life out of my body trying to keep that arm healthy and alive. So
how much of it was just wanting to get out of the hospital?
Yeah, like 90% probably. 90%. Yeah, I'm like, get me out of here. I even remember saying that I was like tapping out. Like, I'm tapping out. Take this arm off of me.
I mean, at 14 years old, I mean, think about that, having to make a decision like that at 14 years old. I mean, you know, I've made a lot of decisions in my life, and a lot of stupid ones, but some good ones.
Me too, trust me.
But at 14, I never had to make a decision like that.
Right. And I think, and you can probably relate to this, it's just one of those situations where you don't, you know, I think the quote is, you don't know how strong you are until being strong is the only choice you have. And I just think it's just a matter of like, not that it was do or die, but kind of.
But so, do or die.
You know, it's like you just gotta make a decision and keep moving. And like I said, I don't regret amputating my arm. It's brought so many people into my life that I would have not met had I not lost it. And it's taught me a lot. And I think I just have a new like appreciation for being here after being that close to no longer being here.
Right. Well, you know, Megan and I were talking before the podcast, and you know, for a lot of my audience, you know, I've been through quite a bit of tragedy myself and just had emergency open heart surgery 8 weeks ago that saved my life. And we were talking about we're both meant to be here. And there's a bigger picture. It's like, okay, what is this bigger picture?
Yeah, there's so many reasons why we wouldn't be here. Yeah. And yet we are, and we're having this conversation with each other. It's, and
then how we got, you know, I never knew Megan personally until, a few months ago. And it was ironic. I was looking for a guest for the podcast, and her dad reached out to me to speak at a chamber meeting.
Yeah,
and it's like,
it's just such a small...
I've been thinking about asking your daughter to be on the podcast.
Really? Yeah. Oh, I didn't even know that.
You know, the way things work, it's just ironic.
It is. I know. Yeah. And like you said, it's just everything happens for a reason.
Right.
And, you know, sometimes people go, I personally have gone through phases where I don't believe that everything happens for a reason, because obviously when you lose your arm or, you know, you lose a loved one, it doesn't feel like this could be happening. It's
like, why? Yeah. It's like the why me, right?
Exactly. And you go through that, you know, it's natural to go through that, but you can, like, yes, maybe it didn't happen for a reason, but you have the choice to create your reality. And, you know, I could be mad for the rest of my life that I'm missing an arm, or I could appreciate that I still have, you know, one arm and a brain and
still alive,
and I'm here, you know. So it's just, what do you want your life to be? I feel like people forget pretty often that they have control over that, and it's something that, like, you create your own reality. And yes, things happen to you and they suck, but you still have power over your mind and yourself.
So what type of kid were you before the accident?
Oh, geez. Well, I'm the oldest of 4, so we'll just say I won't call it
So you're a little bossy then.
I won't call it bossy. I'll just say I was a natural leader. And
I like that.
I was definitely outspoken and probably a little rebellious, which is probably why I got into the driver's seat of a Razor at 14 and said, yeah, I know how to drive. Get out of my way. But yeah, I've always been just I feel like my whole life I've kind of just pushed boundaries in a way.
Yeah.
Like what can I do? Like how can I challenge myself for, I don't know. I always like to kind of do things outside the box or not by the book, as you like to say. So yeah.
So do you think that helped you get through what you had to go through? Because, I mean, to lose an arm at any age or any limb, let alone 14, I mean, that's pretty devastating.
Right. I feel like in certain ways, being 14, when I lost my arm, really aided me in just the rehabilitation process, because when you're 14, your brain and body is still so malleable. And so I was able to like relearn a lot of things probably more easily than if I were, already an adult and my brain was developed and sealed up. But also, it's really challenging because you're 14, you're going through all these hormonal changes, and, you're trying to figure out who you are. And then you're trying to figure out who you are with one arm. So I definitely think that my spirit helped me in that. Like, I just have always kind of prided myself on being tough. I've done lots of sports. I've always tried to keep up with my brothers and keep up with the boys. And I think that definitely helped me. But yeah, I just think.
So you think that helped you emotionally as well? I mean, as far as dealing with something like that emotionally, and I mean, losing your arm, you make the decision to do it, then, you're out in a week. Now you got to go back to reality. So how do you deal with that emotionally as a 14-year-old?
Well, I definitely think that I actually can pretty clearly remember like my going through the grieving process. So I definitely was in denial, and just kind of didn't want to accept that this was my new reality. And so I just didn't really face those emotions for a long time. And I think the longer that I did that, the harder it became, because the reality was I did have one, I do have one arm now. So we got to face that. And so, you bargain with it, you go through the why me, and then eventually, I feel like talking about it with other people. So, I mean, it's really funny. It wasn't like I ever really went to like traditional therapy. It was more so just having conversations with random people. And, you find out that everyone has their trauma. Everyone has stuff that they're going through. Everyone has their story. And I think that the more that I opened up about, what it felt like and the difficulty of it, the more stories I heard of other people. And even through the Paralympics, you see all these other people with various disabilities, and it becomes hard to feel sorry for yourself because, everyone has their stuff. And yes, my trauma is a little bit more, I feel like, obvious, external, right? I'm very obviously missing an arm, and your trauma is inside your heart, you lost your wife. So that's not something that you see. And so maybe that's why I was forced to talk about it more, because people just want to know what happened to your arm.
You do a pretty good job of hiding it.
I know. I'm like, I'll show you later. You can pay. Do you have Patreon subscribers? You can pay to see. That could be an extra. Extra content.
Yeah, for sure.
Gotta pay for that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I just think sports definitely helped me through it. I also was really fortunate to have, a really great wrestling coach, and Lori Saunders, who was just a local strength and conditioning coach. She just recently passed away, though. But she was amazing and made a really huge impact on my life. And I think I just wasn't able to make excuses, especially being the oldest of 4 kids. It was like my parents were busy. They were trying to rebuild themselves financially. And it was kind of just like, suck it up.
Deal with it, right?
Go to school, go to practice. And I wasn't really treated differently either, especially at home. It's funny, if people come over to my parents' house, I'll struggle opening like a jar of pickles or spreading cream cheese. I'll chase a bagel around the counter, but trying to put cream cheese on it. And people, my family, they're just not fazed by it. Like nobody in my family.
Like, she'll figure it out.
Yeah,
right?
like it doesn't even, they're like blind to it. It's so interesting. So I think that helped me become more independent right after I lost it, because it was always like that. You know, it was just kind of like, you can do it. Like,
okay. Yeah.
But yeah.
So did you ever go into a dark space? You know, I haven't told a lot of people, but at 16, I found out I had degenerative disc disease. I had to quit playing sports at 16.
Oh gosh.
I was threatened to be paralyzed.
Wow.
And up into that point in my life,
That's scary.
that was me, sports. Mm-hmm. And at 16, they're like, you play, you have a chance of being paralyzed. I turned to alcohol.
Yeah.
That's how I became an alcoholic by the time, you know.
Right.
I mean, literally, I was an alcoholic at 16, finally figured it out by the time I was 24. But
a lot of people just don't figure it out.
A lot of people don't figure it out, but, you know, I went to that side. Did you ever have anything like that where it was like, I just don't want to deal with this? And
oh, absolutely. You know,
and
I
how'd
think,
you get through that?
Well, I think that, you know, it's kind of human nature to want to anesthetize your trauma and your pain. People, and, you know, you can see before the podcast, we were talking about the opioid epidemic and mental health. And I think that it's easier to numb it than it is to talk about it. It's not easy to talk about it and to be vulnerable and to be open. And so yeah, it was definitely challenging, because also, you know, I felt like I had to be strong for other people in my life, you know, because when you lose an arm, you know, it's also your sister, her sister lost her arm, and my parents' oldest daughter lost their arm. So everybody goes through that trauma with you. And I don't know if it's guilt or what, but you don't want to, I didn't want to put any more on them. But the problem is when you hold stuff in like that, it manifests in other ways, as you know. So yeah, I would say for probably 3 years after I lost my arm, I was depressed and angry. And I didn't know, you know, I couldn't really like envision my future anymore. And when you can't see, especially when you're a teenager, you know, you have this like tunnel vision, and you don't have the perspective of there's a whole world out there, and you know, like there's still, I don't know, you just can't see that long range. So yeah, I struggled a lot. I definitely abused substances. You know, I was smoking weed all the time, abusing alcohol. I wasn't going to school. I think I had 60 absences my junior year at Burlington and a 1.8 GPA.
Kind of sounds like
yeah, a couple things in common.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. And I just didn't care, you know, and it was, I think, an act of like defiance in a way, because I was just angry at my reality.
Right.
But then I came to a point, you ask how I overcame it, and you just get to this point where you realize that everything that you're doing is only hurting yourself and hurting the people around you. So by holding it in and turning to things like drugs and alcohol, you know, you're still hurting your family and hurting yourself. And so at some point I realized I had to take accountability for my life, and that if I didn't, it would just amount to nothing, and I would have a low quality of life and, you know, miserable people around me. And I just didn't want that. And, you know, I have a really supportive family, and the community was great. And, yeah, I was lucky enough to end up at an all-girls boarding school 2 hours south, and it gave me the discipline that I needed. It got me out of the valley for a little while. It was a change of scenery. You know, we had required study hall and room checks, and I wasn't allowed to have a car. And
so was that a turning point for you?
Absolutely.
It was?
Yeah.
So did your parents send you there? Did you want to go there?
Yeah, so...
Was it like, get out of here, we're not dealing with you anymore?
Kind of that, yeah. And I kind of felt that. And so I actually just started looking up boarding schools.
Okay.
So
you pretty much made that decision on your own?
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually kind of funny. I brought them down to Annie Wright with me, and the headmaster asked them if they had any questions, and they were just like, nope. Like, and
when can you take her?
Yeah. Nope, no questions. Like, this looks fine to us. And so yeah, it was a total turning point for me. And it was actually where I ended up finding the Paralympics because there was a retired Paralympic track coach who was just kind of in the backyard. He ended up at a track meet there and saw me and asked me if I had ever heard of the Paralympics. And I said, yeah, I have, but I lost the wrong limb because at the time I had only ever seen Oscar Pistorius, who was the double amputee, the Blade Runner from South Africa.
Yeah, right.
And he was like, no, you didn't lose the wrong limb. There's like hundreds of girls internationally that are running with arm amputations and arm deficiencies. And so in 2015, I ended up going to a National Paralympic meet. I didn't realize when I went that it was a qualifier for World Championships. So then after I competed there, I think I got silver in the 100 and 200. 2 weeks later, I'm at home. I get a phone call from Colorado Springs. I'm like, oh, what's this? I answer it. They're like, congratulations. You qualified for World Championships in Lyon. We're sending you your itinerary and all of your USA gear. Okay. I didn't even have a passport. So I was like, oh, okay. Had to get my passport expedited. And then at that World Championships was when, I saw people from all different countries with all sorts of disabilities and had that, larger scale experience with track. And it was kind of at that point when I was like, okay, like this is what I want to pursue. And that I think was also really transformative for me because it gave me something, like I finally just felt reinvigorated with like something in life. Yes, it was great for me to be at all girls boarding school, but it wasn't like I was thrilled to get up at 7 a.m. and go to class every day. So,
well, and I would imagine doing the Paralympics, I mean, now you can talk to people who've been through what you've been through.
Right.
And understand that you're not alone.
Exactly. And like we said before the podcast, like I think that's just such a huge part of it is so many people experience what we've gone through, but it's not like the resources are always readily available or it's easy to just start talking about it or like, hey, let me just trauma dump on you while we have coffee this morning, so
I'm sure for a long time you would get people looking at you like, well, what's going,
Yeah, for sure. Well, and actually, so my mom, one of her childhood best friends is a breast cancer survivor. So she endured losing all of her hair. And she told me like a month after I was discharged from the hospital, she came over, sat down on the edge of my bed and was like, people are going to stare at you.
Yeah.
And it's going to feel uncomfortable and you just have to be able to brush it off. And that conversation really stuck with me because I think that I hadn't been out enough to really realize that was going to happen. And now I don't notice people looking at me at all. My friends, I had a friend come down and visit me when I was living in Florida and she just kept getting so angry that everyone was staring at me. And I was like, oh, they were? Like, they're like, oh, it's probably because I just look good today. There's no way it's because I'm missing an entire arm. But,
well, it's become your reality. And like you say, you don't think about it, right?
Right. You just adapt, I think. And, there's resources that will help you. And I think talking about it helps a lot. But yeah. You adapt and overcome.
So you start the Paralympics.
Yeah.
You go to the World Games.
Yep, World Championships.
Or World Championship. How'd you do that?
Oh, geez. I made every rookie mistake in the book athletically. Yes, okay. I was just so nervous. I didn't sleep the night before. I'd never been out of the country. So it was just a whole new experience for me. And it was funny because my mom and grandma also ended up flying over and they wanted to see, they were like, let's go to Paris. Let's go see the Eiffel Tower. I'm like, no, I need to stay in my hotel room and rest. So I literally didn't do any sightseeing. I didn't have any fun. And then still kind of, for lack of a better term, shit the bed when it came to competing. So, but it was also motivating.
But it was a learning experience, right?
Yeah, totally a learning experience. Yeah. And, so then I continued to train. When I graduated from the all-girls boarding school, I went to school at UPS just because I felt like I had kind of built this solid network in Tacoma and I liked it there. So I went to UPS, which was just 15 minutes away from the boarding school, and was training for Rio at the time. And when I was
Can you tell the audience what Rio?
So the Paralympic Games, Rio de Janeiro, 2016. I ended up moving down to Florida to train at IMG Academy, and qualified in all 4 of my events: 100, 200, long jump, and the 400. And then 2 weeks before I was supposed to fly to Brazil, I ruptured my Achilles completely during a long jump practice. So I tell people,
Ouch.
yeah, that one was brutal.
I've done that.
Yeah. Oh, have you really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we have so much in common.
Yes. I have ruptured mine. I
Yeah.
wasn't training for the Olympics.
Well, it sucks no matter what. And so yeah.
You and I have talked before, and you told me about that. So, I mean, you deal with losing your arm. Now this, you're getting your life back. You're kind of figuring out what you want to do, and then all of a sudden this happens.
The rug gets,
Yeah, and for anybody that's ruptured Achilles tendon or haven't ruptured Achilles tendon, let's see. I've had 2 open heart surgeries. I've had a vasectomy. I've ruptured my Achilles tendon, and I've had eye surgery. I would take all of those over the Achilles tendon.
I know.
Day.
I tell people that rupturing my Achilles was worse than losing my arm.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because I had this goal that I was so intentional about. But yeah, it's not a fun experience.
So how do you deal with that? What age are you now?
So at that time I was 21. I had just turned 21 that March, and then it was June, I think, when I ruptured it. And it sucks because you do everything right. I was eating right. I was getting 10 hours of sleep. I was doing so much recovery. I'm only wearing my training shoes when I'm not at practice. And you're so intentional and doing all these things so deliberately, and then an injury like this just takes it all away. So it's not something that you're even thinking is possible, especially if you haven't, because I was injury. I mean, aside from losing my arm, I haven't got a single stitch. Right. So it just wasn't something that I was even anticipating. And I had seen so many doctors about it. They were like, oh, it's just bursitis. You'll be fine with just a little swelling in the tendon. Right. It wasn't even diagnosed as Achilles tendonitis or anything at that point.
Okay.
So it was shocking. It was very traumatic. But I also think that going through the loss of my arm and already having I felt like at that point it had been, we were in 2016. So it had been about 7 years since I lost my arm. So I had kind of had my mind wrapped around what the grieving process looked like. So I was able to identify, because I truly went through the grieving process again, watching my team go. I had to withdraw. And then training, it's a total mental challenge as well as physical when you come back from an injury like that, because it makes you fearful.
Well, the mental part's probably the toughest.
Harder, I would say. Yeah. So it was definitely challenging, but I think that situations like that are also opportunities to grow. And I definitely had to grow with that one, but it's helped me develop, and definitely I think helped me just in other areas in life, being able to overcome something like that, which sounds kind of trivial, like it's just an Achilles rupture, but yeah.
But you
got to look for the gift of,
it's a 6-month rehab, right?
Yeah.
And then you got to figure out, so after that, did you qualify or train anymore for the Paralympics?
So I ended up qualifying for 2 more World Championships and a Pan American Games, and I competed better at those international events. But yeah, I think that it was challenging, but I did eventually end up coming back and was in 2019 training for Tokyo, and COVID happened, and I just felt like I had switched. There's seasons in life, and I felt like track had kind of served its purpose for me, and I just wasn't as passionate about it anymore. And what I'm really passionate about is mental health and psychology. And I had never gone back to school since I had taken that leave of absence in 2016 or 2015, because I ended up just staying at IMG to rehab my Achilles. And then my sister moved down and I stayed there for a few more years. But I just really had this feeling inside me that I wanted to go back to school and pursue that again. So now I just finish my bachelor's and moving forward to grad school. And I'm still coaching track. I'm still involved in track. Okay. I will always have a track in my
place
heart.
In your heart.
Yeah, for track and field. But competitively, I just felt like I'm in a new season of life and ready to do something different.
You said you just finished your final exam?
Yes, yesterday.
Woo! Yeah. And you graduate when?
Monday.
Nice.
Thank you. Oh, that was horrible. There's better.
Horrible. Yeah. So that's awesome. So new chapter in your life.
Yeah.
So moving on from sports, but still involved in it.
Yeah. Okay. For sure. And I feel like once you work out for 6 days a week for 7 years straight, you can't not work out.
Becomes a part of your life.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. For my mental health especially, I feel like.
And I
need to.
Yeah, that's something that I want my audience to really think about, is what you just said, the mental health of working out and having something like that. Because, you go through all this stuff, but the one constant you always had was that.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, you can't put a price tag on things like that. Right. It's so valuable and it's so useful, and it's hard. I mean, especially after being injured, I felt insecure in the gym and on the track. I felt like, I wasn't good enough, and I didn't want to run in front of people because I felt like, it just was embarrassing to be in that condition. But you have to start somewhere. Yeah. And, eventually, I feel like the more you commit to something and allow yourself to be embarrassed or feel insecure and just get over those insecurities, it gets easier. And I've seen that even coaching middle school track this year. I have some athletes that are really apprehensive. They were really apprehensive to run certain events because they didn't want to look bad in front of their peers. And I'm like, just do it once. And then if you don't like it and it was as horrible as you think it's going to be, or thought it was going to be, then you don't have to do it again. And 9 times out of 10, they're like, did you see me? Yeah. Oh, that was so fun. I'm so fast. But that's, it translates to like with adults and going to the gym. It's like, it might be uncomfortable or something that you're not used to, and you might not know what you're doing, but you figure it out and it gets easier.
Just taking that little step. I mean,
exactly. That's usually the hardest one. Yeah. It's like the first step. The first step. Yeah. For sure.
So you decided to go back to college, which you just finished.
Yes.
Why did you decide to pursue college and further your education?
Well, it's always been a goal of mine. My dad, I think, just kind of pushed that into my sister and I's head that we needed to get our
Dads
degrees.
Do a good job of that.
They do. I know. And it's funny, though, because right now I feel like the kids in this generation, college is kind of becoming less of a thing than it was in my generation, which I'm like, you lucky Gen Zers. But I feel like it's just always been something that I've wanted to do.
Okay.
And it's one of those things like I just had to do it. And I also am really passionate about mental health and just have a genuine interest in psychology and the way the human mind works. I think, just reading stuff as I went through my own trauma and especially, with the amputation, like I used to search all over for, how do you put your hair up if you have one arm? Right. Or how do you tie your shoes and there just wasn't anything out there. And so I want to be able to produce stuff for young girls or, people who are going through what I went through because there wasn't that much content when I went through it. So that's why I started the YouTube channel where I make the tutorials and, and I just feel like I can do that with psychology too, have a mental aspect to it. But obviously, I want to be qualified and know what I'm talking about before I tell people, this is what you should do for your mental health. Yeah.
So do you feel that's something that will give you clout and credibility, is having that?
Well, I feel like, sure, credibility, but yeah, I don't know if I'd call it clout, but yeah, it's funny. I was talking to someone the other day, and they asked me this question, like, are you doing that so you're credible, or so you have letters at the end of your name, or what? And I was like, well, maybe. And they're like, I'm pretty sure you're credible. Like,
I think you're pretty credible, Megan.
I think that you are okay.
I watched some of your YouTube videos, then I noticed you stopped doing them like 3 years ago.
Oh, geez. I had a feeling you were going to call me out about this.
And it's like, that was some great content. That was some great stuff. And it's like, okay, well, maybe she's in a different phase in her life.
I think that, I guess the reason for stepping away from social media was because it became something where I felt like it was detracting from my personal life. And I feel like social media is so amazing for so many reasons. Right. And, so much good has come from it. But there also is this side to it where you can get so consumed with your image or how you're perceived and comparing yourself to others. And it just became a little bit toxic and overwhelming for me. Okay. And so I think that's why I just set it down with the intention of revisiting, and I just haven't yet.
Right.
I think that in order to do it, I want to like rebrand myself. And so sure, maybe it is getting some of those credentials to speak about mental health and, do trauma-informed coaching or that type of stuff. Because right now it's really just more like occupational therapy type tutorials, like how do you tie your shoes?
Right.
So,
have you had people reach out to you from there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Like almost every day I had to turn my YouTube notifications off because people are like, come back, where are you? Or my favorite ones though are people are like, oh, I broke my arm and this was so helpful, or I just had a stroke and thank you so much. This one worked for me. And actually some occupational therapists asking me if they could use my videos for training and stuff. So yeah, it's a really fulfilling thing. It just is something where you need to be able to balance it because it can become so demanding. Like people don't talk about the amount of work that it takes. I mean, and I'm sure it can be a lot. So yeah, I do plan on revisiting it hopefully soon. I just graduated, so maybe this summer I'll have some free time and pick it back up.
Yeah, I think it'd be a great thing because what I saw, I mean, like you say, if it can help people, that's what it's about, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And I mean, you were here for a reason.
You too.
Yeah, definitely.
100%.
So what's Megan's next journey in life? Where are you going next?
Who knows? Like I told you earlier, I just kind of go where the wind blows me. But I think grad school is in my future. I want to. There's a program I'm looking at that does. It's specifically for adolescent psychology, and I don't know if I mentioned this to you earlier, but there is a huge demand for like childhood psychologists right now, especially in Washington State. So that, and I'll probably continue to coach track on some level and perhaps dabble in the YouTube realm, social media realm again. But eventually what I'd really like to do is like trauma-informed coaching, like independently, or retreat type things. I've been to a couple actually that have just really helped me heal through some of the stuff that I've gone through. Right. And so if I were to be able to facilitate that with the contacts and the network that I have now, I think it could be something that could be really beneficial to people who are in acute trauma and are feeling stuck, or, feeling the pain and the confusion. Yeah.
So did you go through any counseling when you were dealing with all this?
Oh, I'm a huge proponent of counseling now that I'm in my 20s. But when I was a teenager, I was I don't need therapy. And, yeah. So a little bit here and there, but I was pretty defiant. I didn't really go to occupational therapy either. They tried to get me to tie my shoes, and there was only one bunny ear. And then I had to carry around a tool to button my shirt. And I think after that appointment, I was like, I think I'll figure it out
on your
by
own.
myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, like I said, I love therapy. I think everyone probably needs a little bit of therapy, but yeah, back then, heck no, you wouldn't catch me at therapy.
You'll get through it on your own,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
But like we were talking earlier, we were talking about sharing our stories with people and how healing that is. It's hard for people to sometimes do that. It's hard for them to really share their story and talk about what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's so healing. People don't realize that. So I commend you for sharing your story and trying to help people.
And you as well, and for having this podcast, to share other people's stories. So I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. I appreciate you being on. So any final words for my audience?
Oh, putting me on the spot. Well, go to therapy. No, I'm kidding. Just kidding. No, I just think that, we have so much power over our lives and over our situation. Think about your and I's stories as examples. And I just think, if you are able to overcome the hard stuff and face it and talk about it, like we've been saying, that, there's so much good on the other side of pain and struggle. And it usually takes a lot of pain and struggle to get there, but it's definitely worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Own your flaws, right?
Own your flaws, own your life. Yeah.
I love that.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. So
Thanks.
I appreciate you being on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We'll have to do this again.
Yeah.
Once you get to your next phase, you figure out where you're going.
Next, wherever that is. Yeah.
Yeah. So once Megan figures it out and lands where she lands, then we'll get her back on so we can get everybody in contact with her eventually too.
Sounds good.
Because I'm sure you're going to be doing amazing things out there.
Well, thank you. I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to thank everybody for watching Never By the Book episode. Remember, if you're not doing it by the book, you might be onto something great. Until then, be great. How's that?
Sounds pretty good. Woo! It's a wrap.
It's a wrap.
We wrapped it.
Thanks, girl.
Nice. Okay, if I cross my leg, is my knee in it?
I would.
In the frame.
Yes.
Oh.
That's all right. You can show your holy pants. It might bring up a subject.
It's not profesh. No, you're not roasting me on the podcast. You can do it before. Okay. Do I look fine?
Yes.
Okay.
You look beautiful, Megan.
Here we go.